all of the biblical stories. You want to meet David and Solomon, Hezekiah, the kings, the stories of Isaiah, of Jeremiah, they're here.
From here at the Pool of Siloam, when you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life.
Amid the ongoing debate surrounding judicial reforms and the many issues surrounding Israel, the nation is currently grappling with a distressing event. The revelation has sparked heated debate, particularly concerning the discovery being intricately connected to an ancient structure in Jerusalem. This significant discovery holds endless possibilities for the faith and practices of Christianity worldwide. Join us as we delve into the terrifying incident that has terrified Christians all around the world. For hundreds of years, the Siloam Pool has been considered a sacred Christian site, even though in earlier times, the correct location of the site itself could not be pinpointed. The exact location of the original pool that existed during the time of Jesus thus remained a mystery up until archaeologists made a significant breakthrough in June 2004.
And this is literally the water system, the life source of that Jerusalem.
The remarkable discovery was made when 2 archaeologists were hired to do construction work south of Jerusalem's Temple Mount, at the southern end of the ridge known as the City of David. Archaeologists Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukran found 2 stone steps that looked from ancient times. Upon further excavation, they found that the rocks were not regular but were part of a monumental structure from ancient Jerusalem, a pool from the period of the Second Temple, which was the period in which Jesus lived. The archaeologists discovered the structure was 225 feet long, with corners slightly greater than 90 degrees, indicating a trapezoidal shape, with the widening end oriented toward Tyropoeon Valley. The unearthing of the pool has enlightened Christians worldwide. It confirms many things and has sent chills down the spines of Bible believers. The discovery is a crucial piece of evidence validating the accuracy of biblical accounts. The pool was designed in such a way that it has steps leading into the water, and this detail also substantiates the story of the blind man being able to access the pool to wash his eyes, as described in the Gospel of John. The excavation of the Pool of Siloam also revealed an ancient street that led directly to the Temple Mount. Many Christians believe that this street was used in the past by countless pilgrims, including Jesus and his followers, as they made their way to Jerusalem's region. Since the initial discovery, archaeologists have continued to study the site, unveiling even more details about its construction, usage, and significance. The Siloam Pool is located in an area adjacent to a place in the ancient city of David known as the King's Garden, and is just southeast of the remains of the 5th century church and pool, which was initially believed to be the sacred Christian site. What was the Siloam Pool used for during Jesus' time? Water from the Gihon spring at the Kidron Valley flowed into the pool, and as a result, the pool was used as a mikveh for ritual bathing. That's not all. It could also have been an important source of fresh water for the inhabitants of that part of the city. One scholar has even gone to the extent of suggesting that it was a Roman-style swimming pool because of its positioning. Well, whatever its original purpose, the Siloam Pool is tagged in the Bible as the place where Jesus healed the blind man, but not just any blind man, a man blind from birth. As a result, it is a very important Christian site, and its discovery represents a watershed moment in biblical archaeology. The Gospel of John brings us the fascinating story of Jesus healing the man blind from birth at the Pool of Siloam. As Jesus and his disciples walked by, they noticed the blind man. His disciples asked whether the man's blindness resulted from his sins or those of his parents. But Jesus replied that neither was the case. Rather, the man's blindness served as an opportunity to display God's power. Then he proceeded to perform one of his most memorable miracles. He spat on the ground, creating mud with his saliva, and applied it to the man's eyes. He then instructed the man to wash in the Siloam Pool. Obediently, the man followed Jesus' directions, and upon washing, he gained his sight for the first time in his life. This powerful account highlights Jesus' divine authority and emphasizes the role of faith and obedience in experiencing God's miracles. However, the Pool of Siloam isn't just a New Testament landmark. It also plays a crucial role in the Old Testament. As with many sites in the Holy Land, the origins of the Siloam Pool can be traced even further back in history. The pool existed at least 7 centuries before the time of Jesus. King Hezekiah, the king of Judah in the late 8th century BC, foresaw that a siege would be laid against Jerusalem by the Assyrian king, Sennacherib.
Some 2,700 years ago to the time of King Hezekiah, direct descendant of King David.
So, to protect the city's water supply during the siege, King Hezekiah undertook a strategic engineering project that would be considered an impressive feat in any age and a great innovation even in this era. He ordered the digging of a 750-foot tunnel under the city of David to bring water from the Gihon Spring, which lay outside the city wall, inside the city, to a pool on the opposite side of the ridge. In the years that followed, the tunnel, which came to be known as Hezekiah's Tunnel, continued to carry fresh water to this section of Jerusalem, and different pools were built here over the centuries, including the Second Temple Pool. So not only did his awesome idea save the water supply, it also created the sacred Pool of Siloam. This ancient pool is probably the most important and strongest physical evidence today in the account of the blind man Jesus healed. The pool was not small, but was so large that a man could step down into it. The blind man may have washed his entire body, face, and eyes. This pool holds great significance in ancient and modern Christianity, and its discovery has sent chills down the spine of Christians, because the existence of the pool points to one thing: the authenticity of Jesus' existence, as well as his numerous miracles, especially his miracle of healing the blind man at the pool. Christians far and wide have adopted the opinion that this pool gives credence to the healing miracles of Jesus and all these other miracles. The first was turning water into wine in the marriage of Cana. While the unearthing of the ancient pool is a significant milestone in Christian archaeology, some people still shiver when they think about it. Why? It points to the fact that if Jesus' miracles were real, does that not mean his prophecies were real too? And if that was the case, then his second coming is imminent, which means that all the scary things he said would happen will likely start very soon. Now, while Christians are both excited and scared about this awesome discovery, atheists and critics have already started pointing fingers at the fact that nothing has changed. They argue that the discovery of the pool does not mean Jesus' miracles were real or that Jesus himself existed as portrayed in the Bible. The twist in this story is that, instead of weakening the faith of these Christians, the atheistic postulations only serve to make them even more committed to their faith, and the unearthing of spiritually significant things only serves to add fuel to the fire. One such discovery that was made in the past was the discovery of Joshua's altar. The greater the discovery, the greater its effect on people's beliefs. In the 1980s, Israeli archaeologist Adam Zertal of Haifa University discovered a rather controversial site that became popularly known as Joshua's altar. The initial find was just a large pile of stones with a series of stone walls jutting out from the edges of the pile. After more than a year of continuous hard work to remove the stone pile covering the site, what appeared in the people's view was a large rectangular structure that had a ramp leading up to a sacrificial altar. Maybe it could have been discredited if it was just the stones and the altar. However, right there on the altar, many remains of burned bones were found. The entire structure was about 30 feet wide, with walls about 5 feet thick. After a team member showed him a drawing of the bronze altar from the temple in Jerusalem, recorded in the Jewish Mishnah, written around AD 200, Zertal was simply dumbfounded by the similarity and concluded that this must have been Joshua's altar. His discovery could have gone better. It would later change him and cause friction with his colleagues, who were skeptical about the validity of biblical history for this early period. According to Dr. Scott Stripling of Associates for Biblical Research, Zertel was a secularist and agnostic, but what he found there convinced him that the Bible was a reliable historical document. Stripling is also a Christian archaeologist and has also discovered something pointing to the Bible's genuineness. He had directed excavations at Shiloh in recent years, and his team discovered the amulet from the altar site at Elbe. While the large rectangular altar garnered most of the attention, as people just could not help thinking about how it would affect them and their faith, it was a less talked about structure at the site that interested Stripling most. Under the exact center of the rectangular altar were the remains of an older circular stone altar about 6 feet in diameter. Zertal dated it to 1 generation before the rectangular altar. However, Stripling, who favors the Exodus at a standard 1446 BC date, believes the more recent altar belongs to the middle of the Judges period, and the circular altar should be dated much earlier. Christians and enthusiasts don't particularly care which is which. All they know is that the 2 altars were actually from the Bible. Some Christians are strongly of the opinion that the only reason these findings are being made is to bring to their remembrance the fact that Jesus will return soon. Joshua's altar and the Siloam Pool in Jerusalem will remain a talked-about topic for quite some time, as Christians worldwide are yet to recover from the shock of the discovery of these ancient structures, which hold immense spiritual significance. Meanwhile, speaking of Jerusalem and the end time, things are not calm, further heightening the tension surrounding the end time. And so ancient discoveries are not the only things keeping Christians on their toes. Jerusalem is currently witnessing what may be one of its longest stand-in conflicts regarding its ownership. And from the looks of things, this conflict will likely escalate into something else. Something like the fulfillment of the last prophecy that would bring about the end of the world. The iconic city called Jerusalem, where the historic pool was discovered, is considered the spiritual center of the Jews and is of the utmost importance. In the Jewish Bible, it is mentioned over 600 times. The ancient temples of worship the Jews consider the holiest of holies were in Jerusalem, on the spot currently known as Temple Mount. Another remnant of ancient retaining walls in Jerusalem is the Western Wall, known as the Waiting Wall, which once surrounded the temple's courtyard. It has become a place of prayer and reflection for Jews worldwide. Jews believe that the divine presence resides in Jerusalem and that Jerusalem is the site of the Third Temple, while Christians, on the other hand, do not claim to have any ancient standing with the city. They regard Jerusalem as a holy city, primarily because Jesus Christ is very closely associated with it. According to Christian belief, his crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection all happened in Jerusalem. Aside from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is believed to be where Jesus died, other significant Christian sites are also located in the city, such as the Mount of Olives, which is believed to be where Jesus ascended to heaven after his resurrection, as well as the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus was said to have prayed just before his arrest. Other sites make Jerusalem of great significance to Christians. The city is also mentioned in the New Testament at various times, and it is believed that it is the center of Jesus' teachings. Now, where the issue arises is that, in Islam, Jerusalem also holds immense importance and is considered the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. It is connected with the ascension of the Prophet Muhammad on a night journey. Both Jesus and Muhammad had their ascensions there. One structure in Jerusalem that makes the city of great significance to Muslims is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Additionally, many prophets that are revered in Islam are associated with Jerusalem. Furthermore, another structure, the Dome of Rock, a golden structure, is an iconic site cherished by Muslims all over the world. The structure is in the same compound as the Al-Aqsa Mosque. All these make Jerusalem a city of unmatched spiritual significance among all the historical cities in the world. However, although Jerusalem is a city of great religious and historical importance to these three religions, it is also immersed in political and religious conflict and tension. It reminds people of ancient historical prophecies that are bound to happen shortly. Now, what do these interests have to do with the end time? And why has it sent fear to Christians around the world? Conflict is likely to ensue from these clashes of interests. By conflict, we mean war. It is feared that this war will lead to something bigger and far scarier than we've ever witnessed. As Jews are accustomed to worshiping in temples and synagogues, they need to find a place to erect a temple since no major temple has been constructed since the destruction of the first and second temples. Thus, they proposed building the third temple to succeed the previous temples and fulfill a biblical prophecy. But things are not looking good. The disagreement between the Jews and the Muslims has led to more conflict that has further escalated into a war that is still ongoing, in which several Israeli people were taken captive. And Christians all over the world are on the edge of their seats whenever anything happens concerning Israel. They are very concerned that Jesus is out to return. So, we're at the end of time. Christians worldwide have felt uneasy for the past few years since the discovery of the Siloam Pool. Part of the ancient prophecies were fulfilled in the olden days, and the rest are on the verge of being unraveled right before our very eyes. But then, recent events threatened the coming to pass of this prophetic declaration, causing racing heartbeats in people. The recent clash in Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem's Old City, where police officers were firing stun grenades at Palestinians, who in turn threw stones and firecrackers in a burst of violence during the holy month of Ramadan, at the same time when Jews prepared to begin Passover season, has further hindered the fulfillment of the ancient biblical prophecy, as the recent tensions have raised fears of a wider conflagration. By early morning, the Jerusalem compound, usually packed with worshippers during Ramadan, was suddenly silent. The mosque, which sits in a hilltop compound, is sacred to both Jews and Muslims, as it is the third holiest site in Islam and the holiest to the Jews. This hilltop, known to Jews as Temple Mount, is where two ancient temples once stood. The ancient Jewish king Solomon built a permanent place to worship God using loads of gold, silver, bronze, cedar wood, and other precious materials to construct the buildings when he was king of Israel. He got the most skilled workers for the job, and 7 years later, the temple was built. But Solomon's temple did not last long because in 86 BC, a Nebuchadnezzar-led Babylon came crashing down on Jerusalem, destroying the temple along with a good chunk of the city while taking the Israelites captives to Babylon. The Israelites were in captivity for many years. After a few decades, Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, came up with a decree that allowed a group of Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple along with their city under the leadership of Zerubbabel. The second temple was completed after 4 years of hard labor and defending the city in 515 BC. The people dedicated the temple to Yahweh in a big celebration, offering sacrifices and celebrating all year round. Some centuries later, King Herod the Great ruled from 37 to 4 NC. He wanted to show off his great power by renovating the temple to fit his status as king. But despite all his shows of power, tragedy struck again. The second temple was destroyed, but this time it was done by the Romans led by Titus, who stormed Jerusalem in 70 CE and laid siege to the city, destroying it during the First Jewish-Roman War. After the temple's destruction, every temple was rebuilt on a different site because, from the time the second temple went down, Israel had been ruled by external powers and different empires with different policies and restrictions, making rebuilding the temple an impossible task. Judaism changed after the destruction of the second temple. The focus shifted from centralized worship in a physical temple to prayer and study. The effect was that Rabbinic Judaism became the major form of religious practice. Synagogues were no longer used as temples, but as community centers. Nonetheless, some groups in Israeli society still desire to rebuild a third temple on the same site where the previous temples stood. Whether they'll succeed is still being determined, considering that they have faced opposition from different groups, most recently and, more particularly, Islamic organizations. The power tussle between the Israeli people and Islamic organizations led to the construction of different Islamic megastructures like the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Any attempt to reconstruct an Israeli temple on that site would spark conflict and escalate the hostility. Nevertheless, reconstructing the third temple is important for fulfilling biblical prophecies. Will these prophecies be fulfilled, as some people believe? Let's uncover the truth behind this belief by looking into some biblical prophecies. These prophecies are explained extensively in some Bible books, including Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. The prophecies include the restoration of Israel, the return of Jews to their homeland, the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and the coming of the Messianic kingdom. When we look at the records of past events, we find cases where biblical prophecies came to fulfillment. A good example is found in the book of Ezekiel 37, verses 21 and 22, which talks about how God would bring the Israelites back into their land, and that is exactly what happened in 1948 when the modern state of Israel was formed. Then there's also the prophecy of wars in Matthew 24, verses 6 and 7. Jesus said all these conflicts would happen, but it would not be the end. We've had 2 world wars. It's uncertain if a third will exist. There have also been countless military clashes and clashes between nations, just like the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Some people see it as the ongoing fulfillment of that prophecy. In addition, there's Luke 21, verse 11, a prophecy about natural disasters such as earthquakes, famine, and pestilence. It's no news to anyone in the world that we've had major earthquakes like the one that rocked Japan and Indonesia, as well as other countries quite recently, leaving many people dead and even more people homeless. People are not strangers to famine as well. Some countries in Africa and Asia are currently facing this challenge. So based on all these major fulfillments of biblical prophecies, Jews believe strongly that the end is near. Rather than wait for Temple Mount to be available, they are preparing. As part of their preparations, they established an institution called the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is saddled with overseeing and managing the necessary arrangements to reconstruct the temple. The Sanhedrin is taking all steps to get things ready for temple service. To achieve that, they have been working on many projects, including the biblical temple forest, which is crucial for meeting the agricultural needs of the third temple. According to the vice spokesperson for the Sanhedrin, Rabbi Hillel, the temple is not just about animal sacrifice and blood, it's about the connection between land and the divine. Additionally, the Sanhedrin established an institution for those who would serve as priests in the temple, and they have started manufacturing replicas of ancient temple materials, some of which are being displayed. So far, things seem to be pretty easy to get, except for the red heifer, which is an important thing needed in the temple, as seen in the book of Numbers 19, verses 2 to 10, where God commands Moses and his brother Aaron to instruct the Israelites to bring a completely unblemished and unused red heifer to be slaughtered outside the camp by a priest and its blood sprinkled outside the tabernacle. After countless failures to get a red heifer, the Jews got answers to their prayers and were warned that the end time was very close to fulfillment when a red heifer was sent to them by a devoted Christian. A ceremony was held at Ben Gurion Airport to mark this significant event. The Calves were then quarantined for 7 days. After the quarantine period, they were released to 2 different locations. One was released to the public, and the other was kept in an undisclosed location to keep it safe. In these locations, the heifers would be nourished until they reached their 3rd year, during which they'd be slaughtered and their remains kept as ash for purification. As part of the Jews' preparation for the future reconstruction of the Third Temple and the fulfillment of prophecy, the Jews also celebrated a festival called Sukkot, as done in biblical times. From all we've seen so far, we can see that many biblical prophecies have been fulfilled, except for Armageddon. Will this prophecy be fulfilled? In the biblical context, Armageddon is depicted in the book of Revelation as a place where nations gather to wage war against God. In Revelation 19, verses 11 to 21, Jesus is described as returning to earth as a mighty warrior, leading an army of angels. He defeats Satan and his forces and establishes his messianic kingdom. The battle represents the final conflict between Satan and his followers and God's intervention to bring justice. The Battle of Armageddon is supposed to happen after the rebuilding of the Third Temple, but people are now beginning to worry because, looking at it, there are lots of crises in Israel, and with the severity of the crisis between Jews and Muslims over the ownership of Temple Mount, one cannot help but wonder if these cries will eventually lead to the Battle of Armageddon. What are your thoughts concerning the incident in Jerusalem that has terrified Christians worldwide? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to see more videos.